Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this COMIUCAP Asia Oceana Regional Conference. The topic of my presentation is man's relationship with God and the pandemic, the Filipino religiosity and faith amidst the pandemic. Introduction. This global pandemic is unprecedented. Nothing in our recent memory and history has drastically and radically affected our lives. Because of COVID-19, the whole world has stopped. Commerce and business, travel and tourism, religious and cultural activities, even our social and personal activities have to stand still. Our social and personal life has changed so much that we can no longer have face-to-face contact even with people close to us. We are confined to our homes. Work is so vital to our daily existence was affected and must be modified due to the restrictions imposed to contain the spread of the virus. World economies are devastated, and the poor countries are still struggling to keep their economies afloat. Our religious and spiritual life has been affected, that we are attending religious activities online or through virtual mode. Electronic gadgets have become even more essential in our daily tasks and activities, even for spiritual matters and expressing our faith. To think about it, this pandemic has somehow encouraged us to look into one aspect of our life, and that is our relationship with God. During these precarious moments in human history, man is compelled to examine his spiritual orientation and religious commitments. In a short presentation, I discuss man's relationship with God during this pandemic, focusing on Filipino religiosity and faith. The Filipino religiosity and faith and the pandemic. The Philippines is the most predominantly Catholic country in Asia. There are also Muslim communities in southern Philippines with their own religious identity and the indigenous peoples. However, be it Christian, Muslim, or indigenous, the Filipinos are known for their deep spirituality and religiosity. Religion and its practice matter to most Filipinos. In an interview conducted by Statista Research Department in November of 2020, 73% of respondents in the Philippines stated that religion was very important for them, and only 3% of respondents stated that religion was not very important. The Filipinos' profound spirituality is embedded and reflected in their culture. Filipinos have a strong sense of connectedness or relationship with the sacred or divine or with God. And such a deep sense of connectedness and relationship is the basis of their spirituality. Such spirituality is manifested in their religious practices, beliefs, and rituals. Religious activities and commemorations or celebrations are very much part of their daily activities. The Filipinos almost always put a religious meaning and significance to the different aspects of their lives. There's always a kind of overlapping or blending of the cultural and religious, especially when they celebrate the feast of the saints, the life of Christ, and the feast of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The Filipino faith and religiosity is a full display during religious celebrations. And one of such religious celebration is the Holy Week, commemoration of the Passion and Death of Christ. Many Filipinos go home to their respective parishes and hometowns not only to commemorate Holy Week, but to be reunited with their families. The Santo or Santa or the Paso that each family takes care of is at the center of such family reunion. Even Christmas celebrations are deeply religious and embedded in their culture. Filipinos have the longest Christmas celebrations in the world. It starts from November or September and ends in January. It is a tradition for most Filipino Catholics to attend the 9-day Misa de Gallo or Misa de Aguinaldo and the Midnight Mass on Christmas Eve. The effect of the pandemic on religious activities. The pandemic, however, has put to test such faith and religiosity. For the first time in their lives, they have to perform the religious obligations online or in virtual mode. When the Philippine government implemented lockdowns to curb the spread of the virus, daily life dramatically changed. For the first 3 months of the pandemic, the government has gradually placed the entire country in enhanced community quarantine or ECQ, the highest level of lockdown. people were required to stay home for the duration of the lockdown. Because of the lockdowns, the Filipino Catholics commemorated Holy Week and Christmas last year in the confines of their homes. And their only medium to participate in the religious activities was social media or the television, using their gadgets, smartphones, laptops, tablets, and the television sets. Filipino families conversed around their television sets or shared their electronic gadgets with their family members and made do of a small table or a stool with lighted candle and crucifix as an altar. Churches are almost empty with only the priest and mass server and a few lay ministers, maybe a number of choir members, all maintaining physical distance, celebrating the mass inside the church. Churchgoers content themselves with receiving the body of Christ through spiritual communion. Because of the prolonged lockdowns, Christmas celebrations were subdued and they were not able to attend the 9-day Misa de Gallo and the midnight mass in the church. When the lockdown or quarantine level was lowered, the people were allowed to go out of their homes, but they had to observe the required minimum health protocol, wearing face masks and face shield, physical distancing, regular washing of hands and disinfection, etc. Social and religious gatherings were allowed, with a very limited number of people who could participate. Depending on the level of quarantine, churches may allow a certain percentage of the total capacity of the church, usually from 10% to 30%, to attend Mass or other religious activities. Therefore, the majority of the faithful continue to attend religious activities online or in virtual mode. Now, the effect of the pandemic on mental wellness. The pandemic has caused psychological, mental, emotional problems to many people of different ages and different social status and backgrounds. Studies have shown that people are experiencing anxiety, fear, depression, and helplessness, among others. The majority of people are affected by separation from and death of loved ones, whom they cannot even give the proper burial or even see for the last time. Loss of freedom and mobility because of prolonged lockdowns, uncertainty about the cure of the disease, and the feeling of helplessness because of loss of job. There is also alarming rise of suicides because of stressful conditions. A study on the psychological impact of COVID-19 pandemic in the Philippines showed that during the early phase of the pandemic, one-fourth of respondents reported moderate to severe anxiety, and one-sixth reported moderate to severe depression and psychological impact. Finding a brighter side of the pandemic. But if there's something positive to all this chaos, fear, and uncertainty, is that this pandemic forces us to reflect on the most essential things in our life, or the things that matter most: our family, our job, survival, health, and the health of many people. How now we realize the importance of being with our family and loved ones, to eat together, to play together, to bond together. Now it is important to be content with the relief packs offered by the government and be satisfied with the basic necessities. Now we realize the importance of our health and well-being. We also recognize the need, or that we need the help of, and sacrifices of other people, especially those of our frontliners. Still, there's something very providential about how and when this pandemic happened. For a Catholic, it has somehow unfolded in a crescendo reaching its highest point during the Holy Week last year, a time when we are supposed not only to commemorate the passion, death, and resurrection of Christ, but also to reflect on our lives and our relationship with God. This pandemic has compelled us to focus on one very essential matter in our life: our relationship with God. And we can observe that people have become religious and spiritual because of the pandemic. Catholic families are now praying the rosary as a family. It has become a daily activity for most of us. There's a time to attend Holy Mass, even on television or our gadgets. Most messages on social media enjoin everybody to pray. Indeed, the pandemic has driven us back to the very ground of our being and existence, God. And to some extent, it has compelled us to examine our lives, ourselves, and our relationship with God. And perhaps it has reaffirmed, and strengthened our faith in God. As while the negative effect of the pandemic is very much evident in the psychological and mental well-being, people, people who have a firm religious and spiritual grounding based on their faith have somehow managed to face the challenges of the pandemic. With their religiosity and their faith, the Filipinos have managed to hang on and be resilient amidst the challenges of the pandemic. A survey conducted by Veritas to survey of Radio Veritas showed that the majority of Filipinos believe in the importance of faith in fighting COVID-19. According to the result of the survey, 89% of the respondents, that's roughly 9 out of 10 Filipinos, believe that faith is very important in our fight against COVID-19, while 9% said it is important and 2% said it is somewhat important. Thus, instead of succumbing to the dead weight of the pandemic, they have faced anxiety, fear, depressions, and hopelessness and helplessness with profound faith. According to Father Anton Pascual, the president of Radio Veritas, and I quote, most of the respondents believe that God is much bigger than this COVID-19 health crisis. They believe that God can surmount all. He is intimately involved in every part of our lives and is concerned with our afflictions. He will never forsake or overlook us. Brother Clifford Sorita, head of the Veritas survey, adds that, and I quote, the survey is indicative of the respondents' desire to conquer fear with faith. To fight an invisible enemy brings a lot of anxiety and fear. Leaving the safety of our homes will definitely take a lot of courage for most of us. In so doing, we will master all the strength needed through the gift of faith. The faith of the Filipino Catholics and by the Filipinos in general is a faith that is expressed both personally and socially. Therefore, the expression of faith during the pandemic takes both a personal character, for example, through personal devotions, and social character, for example, through community or family online or virtual praying of the rosary. Aside from attending online or live stream masses, devotees share religious videos to observe the religious commemoration. During the Holy Week commemoration, some devotees shared instructions on how to make homemade palm crosses from palm branches and how to make makeshift altars. And since they cannot go to the church for religious celebrations and processions, they set up tables and candles and religious images to be blessed by the priest who went around the neighborhood. Many Filipino Catholics have found creative ways to express their religiosity and faith during the pandemic. The Catholic Church in the Philippines has done its fair share of strengthening the faith of the Catholic faithful and has become a beacon of light for those severely affected by the pandemic. Reflecting on man's relationship with God, this brings us to the heart of man's faith and religiosity, his relationship with God. There is an important and profound question to be asked, a question that believers have to answer. During this pandemic, it seems that people are calling out to God. But before the pandemic, how were our life and our relationship with God? Or do we ever have a relationship with Him? If man looks into himself, he will see himself as full of himself. We have been consumed with ourselves, with our personal interests, goals and ambitions, our achievements and successes. We thought that we could do it all with our powers and abilities. Who needs divine guidance and intervention anyway? There's no need to look up and pray for assistance when we are doing fine. Most of the time, only those in dire situation look up and pray. When there is no food on the table, we pray for food. But when food comes, most of the time, we hardly give thanks. Most people would pray for luck, win the lotto, win a prize, but they forget to give thanks when luck strikes. If we look back in the present or the recent past in human history, we can undoubtedly say that man has achieved a lot in science, technology, economics, and commerce. We have reached the moon, continue to explore the universe. We can travel around the globe in a matter of hours. We can communicate with anybody around the world in a matter of seconds through our gadgets and fingertips. We can generate as much income and profit through online business transactions. We can enjoy the comfortable living in our homes with all the amenities that technology can offer. All these achievements have made man or human life easier and comfortable, convenient, and efficient. Man feels he is a god. With these achievements, man feels that he can do everything and anything. He felt entitled and privileged because he thinks he accomplished attained all this through and by his own efforts, reason, and power. Man has exceeded his own expectation. Man can summon all his abilities and powers and all the positive traits and qualities that he has and make things happen. Who knows what man can achieve in the future, given all his powers and abilities? Indeed, the serpent in the garden was right. Man can do better as gods and feels like he is God. According to Ludwig Feuerbach, the mystery of religion is that man projects his being into objectivity and then again makes himself an object of this projected image of himself that's converted into a subject. What the devout mind worship as God is nothing but the idea of the human species being imagined as a perfect individual. God is the projection of the human mind. And therefore, what is really worshipped in religion is not God, but humankind himself. This God feeling has created a new religion, an anthropocentric religion. It's a religion with God, with man as God. So who needs God? Man does not need him anymore. If before man depends on God because he cannot do anything and that he's powerless against the force of nature, now he discovered and harnessed all his powers and abilities. There's no need for such a God because man has discovered that he is like a God. Nietzsche, following the thoughts of Feuerbach, claims that the belief in God arose because of we are unable to have faith in ourselves. And so we need to project something out there to which we can cling on. God's existence is an ideology, one of our most persistent illusions. However, once we realize the reason for this belief, then religious faith is no longer credible. And according to Nietzsche, Christianity has been motivated by weakness. It has sided with all that is weak and base. But lightning strikes in the form of this pandemic. And in an instant, man realizes his limitations, finitude, his inadequacies, and powerlessness against the forces of nature. He is no better than God. He is not God. Once again, human pride is rebuked. Man cannot play God. Instead, he must seek God, including remarks, man, the God seeker. According to Max Scheler, man is a God seeker. The search for God leads man to an experience of an ultimate personality, the absolute being. In this religious experience, man feels that he is nothing. And this creature feeling is a result of man's experience and direct contact with the source of his being. This is what Schleiermacher calls the feeling of infinite dependence. Man has no choice but to respond with religious faith. And as a response to such faith, God meets man as an eternal Tao, according to Martin Buber. Thus, amidst these trials and tribulations, although man is finite and powerless against the force of nature, there is a God who never abandons him despite his self-centeredness and egoism. And as man continues to develop his abilities to improve his life, he must always reaffirm and strengthen his fundamental relationship with God. As we look for ways to stop the continuous spread of the virus that causes COVID-19 and contain and eventually stop this pandemic, we will surely rely on our human powers and abilities. But limited our abilities and powers may be, there are powers and abilities that God has given us, and with his intervention, we will eventually find a way to stop this pandemic. There's always hope and optimism amidst any human tragedy. As we try to cope with the new normal, there will always be that lingering thought about human desire to play God. But for the believers and the faithful, especially the Filipino Catholics, God will always be by their side. They will always have their religiosity and profound faith to strengthen them, to carry them through amidst any crisis or tragedy. Thank you very much for listening.